This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Welcome to this episode of The New Christian, a podcast for anyone exploring faith, asking big questions about God, Jesus, and what it really means to call yourself a Christian. Today we're chatting with Ben McEachen from Hope Mornings. And in fact, for this very first episode of The New Christian, turning things around a little bit, I'm actually going to be handing over the reins to Ben McEachen to interview me as to how I became a Christian and why I'm creating this podcast.
You're taking my job for me,
Sorry,
Chris.
yeah.
Although I appreciate on your podcast, The New Christian, congratulations on the new podcast, The New
you.
Christian. In the first episode, you're giving me the reins. That's really nice of you, but you've already asked my first question, which is why are you doing this, Chris?
I'm not the best at being interviewed, really. No. Okay, so why am I doing it? Relatively recently became a Christian. Like I said, sort of in the introduction, when is that? That's a good question. In fact, that will be an episode. When do I know I'm a Christian?
Oh, great.
Yeah, well, because
on the first season of New Christian,
season,
you're getting to that?
Yes, it will be. It's the last episode. That's when you finally get there and go, well, am I? Because, of course, you start going to church, but you're not baptized. Then you get baptized. So that's when you got. But what about before? It's hard to know. And
this is all very recent for you.
right, only in the last under 3 years of recording, under 3 years of becoming a Christian. And so we're going to be talking about all sorts of things. Who is God? Is the very next episode is going to be with Max Jagannathan from the Center for Public Christianity, talking about who is God. And it's a very generic question. It's who is the God that when you're first even thinking of there maybe being a God, discovering God, rediscovering God, who am I speaking to? When I maybe get down on my knees next to my bed and pray, or when I'm laying in bed and praying, or when I'm in the car driving to work and praying, or whenever I'm going, God, where are you? I think you're real. Please help me. I don't even know what I'm supposed to say.
These are exactly the sort of questions that you and your wife, Vanessa, were wrestling with just a couple of years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
What was your relationship with God like before?
I think when I was a really little kid, I think there might have been some type of relationship, but neither of us actually grew up in a Christian household. Nominally Christian, but we didn't go to church. It was really just on our birth certificate, all the documents at school, right? But apart from that, no. It was a very secular, non-Christian, non-religious household.
Sounds a lot like Australia.
Yeah, right. And I think there was one thing Dad would always say, and I think it's what he said that his dad told him, and it was just the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. That was the closest the house really ever got to Christianity, apart from maybe Christmas and Easter, and then how close were we really getting? I don't know. Didn't go to church at Christmas or Easter. So yeah, there was no real true connection with God. Teenage years, I did get actually a Gideon Bible at high school. And I do still have that. And
that exact one?
Yeah, little green one, little pocket one. And I do remember reading through that. I think it's just Psalms and New Testament, but I did read through bits of it when I was as a teenager, because I think every teenager, that's a troubled time. And I actually found some solace in it. I do wish that I'd followed through and gone to church as a teenager. I really do regret that. And then go through my university days. I did Bachelor of Science. It's very materialistic. Everything could be proven and discovered through formulas and just better equipment, of course. And that was how I saw. And so my relationship to the world and everything around me, the God element just started to I turned away from it. I can't say he turned away from it. I don't think God ever turns away or stops speaking, but we can, I guess, turn away. And I lived in a very materialistic world, and it did not satisfy anything. I thought it was all very good and whatnot, but it ended up feeling very empty many years later.
Is that then why you started searching for God? Is that even how you describe what happened a couple of years ago?
I think both Vanessa and I have had some very interesting experiences in our lives and we both have Vanessa did biology at university, so and other subjects. Vanessa's way more educated than myself, but we both were at university, different universities, but we studied sciences and lots of different types of subjects. And over the years, we saw things that I think were counter to what the sciences how it would have explained things. There were things that you can't explain. That led us both into, I think, the New Age world and all that goes with it.
Oh, you started looking into other religions, other belief systems?
Other religions, other philosophies of life, all sorts of things.
Because what, you're basically looking for an explanation for the things that science can't explain.
There's a void. There's a clear void, an emptiness that you feel deep within. I think anyone who hasn't, and I'm not going to say that I've somehow just completely filled it, because guess what? I'm human and I still sometimes turn away, right? So that feeling still is there at times, but way more so before finding God. I guess before finding God, yes. And nothing was filling that. Nothing was satisfying that. Nothing really answered it. And I'm not saying that coming to Christianity has answered all the questions, by the way. It's asked a whole lot more, hence this podcast, hence season 1, and probably a season 2. So the relationship was very distant from God. And it wasn't until years later, like you mentioned just a few years ago, when Vanessa and I started listening to Bible in a Year podcasts before going to church. Well, I think over the years, people had, in my science and materialist type of world and friends, that the worldview was very much like, oh, Chris, you don't need the Bible. Or people would just tell me, oh, the Bible says X, Y, and Z. And so I, instead of primary sources, would take other people's opinions as being the gospel truth, which was not true. I think I was like, okay, I'm going to read this, but I don't know if I can really do this, so maybe I'll listen to it first. So I was listening to the Bible. They would read 3 chapters. It was an American couple. It was a really good podcast. They would read 3 chapters and then they would discuss it.
It wasn't you and Vanessa listening to it together?
No, this is the thing. So Vanessa was listening. She'd also listened to a Bible in a Year podcast. She didn't get past some part of the Old Testament, so she did stop, but the interest was there. She listened to another podcast, not a Christian podcast, just like it's close to Christian living, but it's not, right? It's a very generic sort of podcast that occasionally she would talk about her faith. But Vanessa found some sort of solace in that. And then she started again going back to other Christian podcasts and all that sort of stuff.
But you're doing this separately?
Yeah, it's completely separate. We knew the other was interested. How interested, we didn't know. And it all culminated one night. Vanessa said, very sheepishly, I should add, would you mind if maybe one Sunday you'd drive me to church? Like in those words were her not expecting me to want to come along. And my response was, it was actually a happiness, because I think I'd been wanting to go, but not wanting to ask the question. I was like, okay, let's go. Which is really funny, because I look back on my life, and I don't think at any point I actually wanted to be a Christian. Like if you asked me when I was at university, I would have said, I do not want to be a Christian. Didn't want to be a Christian. I saw the Bible study guys at uni. I thought, oh no, I know what this world's all about. But here I am, 20 years later, so keen to go to church. So we go to church, nervous, really, really nervous. Our hands are sweating. We were worried the place was just going to just burn down. And it sounds so silly, right? But
I'm sure a lot of people actually feel that, yes.
Like, we didn't think it probably really would. Did we really? I don't know. That's actually, yeah. We were nervous and we were worried. How do we do? What do we do? What do we wear? Where do we sit? Who do we speak to? What do we say? I don't know any of the right words. I don't know the right words because it's a whole other language. You don't realize how much of another language it is. I didn't know how to read a Bible. What is it when it has a colon in the middle? What does that mean? And there's a dash there. What kind of crazy computer code are you spinning here? No, it's actually really simple once you get the hang of it.
You guys were listening to podcasts on your journey, but were any of them answering the kinds of questions that you started to develop? Everything from what's going on with church, what should I wear, when do I stand up and sit down, to who is God or Jesus or Holy Spirit, or what's this thing called the Trinity, or where do I start reading the Bible? Like, did you find those resources?
But not all of it. Bits of it. So you get some of the theology, but the practical elements of going to church, serving, growth groups, small groups, whatever group, they've got different names. You'll find that out as you listen to the podcast. Why is everyone so nice? Why are they so nice? We lived in this world of, it's the whole quid pro quo, right? But none of that works at church. People want to serve because it's a blessing to serve. Full stop. So whereas we didn't want to ask for any help because we were like, we're going to have to help. That was the mindset as we're coming into church, because that's how the world outside of church operates. It's all, I do something for you, that's something for me, right? But church is not about that. It's, you don't have, there's no, like, I will just serve you. And everyone's trying to serve. So it works. But it's a totally different, so not only is it a different language, it's a culturally completely different.
The New Christian then is your attempt to try to answer some of those questions that you and Vanessa had as you were exploring Christianity. This is the podcast that you wished was around when you were becoming Christian? Definitely.
Yes, that was the goal. This podcast I wanted to make no matter what. I think it's great that I'm hope to be able to do it here because I think it's the best place to be doing it. But yeah, I guess I see the world in a certain way, being a radio person, and podcasting felt like I'm not the guy who's going to write a book. But podcasting, talking about things, that's how I get around the world. That's how I navigate the world. And so I thought a podcast is the perfect way to try and detail all these steps in the journey. Talk it out loud. Hey, I experience this. I don't understand why they do this. Hey, some expert, why do they do this? Oh, great. Makes sense now. That's basically the idea for the podcast.
But it must have been difficult trying to work out what steps to put into the first season, particularly. It's the New Christian. You are aiming to provide all kinds of answers to initial questions and questions that some people might think I'm embarrassed to ask, or it's going to offend somebody if I ask. All those sorts of questions rolling around in you, Chris, and then you're trying to encapsulate that in one first season of a podcast.
Yeah, so the first season's kind of a bit more, it's closer to an album. So every other season, I imagine it'll be a bit more week to week, just finding something that's an interesting concept to work in do a deep dive. But the first season, I really wanted it to have a set flow. Us chatting right now is the beginning. It's why are we doing it, right? And then next week is Who is God with Max Jagannathan. Who is Jesus with Skip Smith from Alpha, they do courses at churches to help people who are coming to faith. We talk about who is the Holy Spirit, there's how to read the Bible, how to pray. All of these things get covered. Navigating church, I mentioned. This is a whole journey right through to the last episode, which is with Simon Manchester. When do I know I'm a Christian? Which is it's a funny question to ask. You think along this point, I've already become a Christian.
Surely I'd know.
Yeah. Simon does a great job at actually talking to that. So you definitely want to be tuning into that. And then at the very end, there'll be a few weeks-ish where we'll take all of the questions that have been submitted by you over each episode. So whatever question you have regarding an episode, just send it through, and then we'll be recording an extra episode at the end. That'll be a bonus one, all Q&A questions answered with. And we don't even know who we're going to interview then. We'll come to that when we get to that, and then there'll be a bit of a break before season 2, which will be a bit more. Don't want to say loosey-goosey, but it's one episode at a time. This is a very structured season. This is hoping to help someone to hold their hand through a very nervous moment. When you decide to become a Christian, life doesn't just get better. It does, but not how you expect it would. It's actually really difficult. There are challenges. There are there are you're learning new language. You're learning, if you've not been a Christian for 40 odd years and then you become a Christian, it is not an easy thing to just go and do. It's worthwhile, but it's not easy. And so this is hopefully going to be a really good way to help people on that journey. In fact, there's an episode that Max Jagannathan suggested should be in season 1, not season 2. Why is there evil? Which is a really important question, and that is in there as well.
That's such a great question. You're answering that in this first season?
We'll attempt to answer it. Yeah, look, Carl Faze from Olive Tree Media is there for that episode, and he brings a lot to it. And you got to listen to it.
And Chris, each episode, do they run for 3, 4, 10 hours? You're picking big subject matter here to try to even give an initial glimpse at. Are they going to be lecture series?
Yeah, right. So they're all about 30 to 40 minutes. One of them runs a bit over an hour. That's the Navigating Church episode. That's because we look at a whole lot of different things. We talk about how do we get to church? What do we do at church? Why do we go to church? We even look into some of the denominations as to what they all sort of, how their viewpoints sit, so you can get a bit of an idea. So that one goes a bit longer, and then for the rest, they're around 30 to 40 minutes. Some a little bit less, some a bit more, but that's roughly the ballpark.
That's a real bite-sized introduction you're offering.
Yeah, look, so some of these episodes, we are going to have to come back with more detail in other seasons. This is just supposed to be enough to give someone that starting point, just to keep walking their way through this journey. It's just to help them take those first steps.
How do you hope God's going to use it?
I pray that God will bring a whole lot of people through here. But as you know, it's got nothing to do with me and everything to do with God. And so I do pray that God will work wonders through a whole lot of people with this first season in particular.
We'll all be praying exactly the same thing, Chris. Congratulations on the first season of New Christian.
Thank you very much, mate. Thanks for listening to The New Christian. If you'd like to submit a question for a future Q&A episode, or just want more information on your faith journey, head to hopepodcasts.com.au and select The New Christian. Just scroll down and you'll be able to submit your questions there. Now, this is going to be a weekly podcast, so do hit the follow button on your favourite podcast app. Even better, pass this episode on to a mate or a family member whom you think would benefit from this chat. And until next time, take care.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.